Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month edition of the DSSC Insight Series, which is the monthly webinar appointment of the Data Spaces Support Center. I see that many of you are joining today. So while we give the time for everyone to connect, thank you for attending the webinar in such a large number. Today, we will talk about a topic which is key for our community, which is generative AI and data spaces. More specifically, we will unveil a white paper which has been published by the Strategic Stakeholder Forum of the Data Spaces Support Center. Now, we will do so with the following speakers lineup. We will have an introduction by Gianfranco Cecconi, the Executive Director of the Data Spaces Support Center. We will then go into more the specific of the white paper with Ana Garcia Robles, Secretary General at the Big Data Value Association. We will have Savas Rogotis, Senior Project Manager at the Big Data Value Association. And we will have Tobias Hugenberger, Group Lead at Fraunhofer ISSD. Just a quick note that unfortunately, Emer Farrell from the European Commission will not be able to join us today as a speaker. After the presentation of the paper, we will have a Q&A session at the very end. So stick around because you will have the chance to ask all the questions you need to ask. Just a note, you can also ask questions during the webinar. There's a dedicated chat box in Zoom. We will do our best to address all the questions, and anything that is left unanswered will be dealt with at the very end. So a few usual housekeeping items. So first of all, this webinar is recorded. You can watch this recording of this webinar and all the previous webinar on our YouTube channel. And you can scan the QR code on the slide and you can access the YouTube channel. And you can also find all the recording of the Data Space Symposium for 2024 and many other interesting educational video about data spaces. Then, in order to stay up to date with everything that we do, you can subscribe to the DSSC newsletter. It's the fastest way to really know everything that the DSSC is up to, from technical deliverables to event and communication. You can subscribe to the newsletter by scanning the QR code or clicking on the link on the slide. Last but not least, before leaving the floor to Gianfranco, I am very, very happy to unveil that to save the date for our flagship event, the Data Space Symposium 2025, which will take place at the Hilton Hotel in Warsaw from the 11th and 12th of March. We are really hoping to replicate the success to this year's event, which saw over 900 participants. So please save the date. We're looking forward to have you there. And just a really last slide on this. The event is catered for the community, is for you. So while the ticketing has not been released yet and the sponsorship packages are not been released yet, we're really eager to get to have you on board. So if you want to contribute to the event, you want to sponsor, you want to just being up to date with all the program and developments, please get in touch with us. There's a website of the symposium is already live on the QR, and you can scan the QR code and access the website. Or you can write us an email at events@dssc.eu, and we will get back to you with all the information you need. So I'm done with the introduction, and now I'm very happy to leave the floor to Gianfranco for a short intro. Now I'll stop sharing my screen and let me see. Gianfranco, the floor is yours. I'll make you a bit more visible to everyone. There you go.
Thanks, Anna, and good afternoon to everybody. And thanks to find the time to be again with us to follow the activities of the DSSC and give us the opportunity to share with you the work we do. As Anna introduced me correctly already, my name is Gianfranco. I'm the Executive Director of the Data Space Support Center for Project Coordinator Borisotto. And in the spare time, I'm also the Chief Solution Officer at the International Data Spaces Association. It's a non-for-profit for the development of data spaces practices and technology, and the creators of the Data Space Protocol. Today, in particular, we will discuss a few questions that we at DSSC get pretty often, despite the answer being simple, perhaps depending on who you ask. So what's the relationship between AI and data? Why do we need so much high-quality data to feed AI applications? And finally, why, particularly in Europe, do we believe that collaborative models such as the ones you find in data spaces are the solution to procure all the data we need for AI and for other advanced applications? The first question perhaps is easy to answer. So what's the relationship between AI and data? With the term AI, we refer to a collection of algorithms that simulate or reinvent what we humans call intelligence. In most cases, these algorithms are nothing magic. It's just very articulate ways to process large amounts of data, to look for interesting properties or patterns. We call it AI because its complexity is such that for human intelligence, for us, poor humans, following what exactly happens in that magic box is becoming progressively more difficult. We can't open the box and see the gears spinning in the engine, so to speak. With the tools we have today, the engine is so big and fast that we cannot really observe it, we may say. So why do we need so much and such high quality data to feed AI applications? Because its output can only be as good as what we feed it as an input. If we gave a generative AI every single speech I've made since I started working in my bad English, you wouldn't get Oprah Winfrey or Winston Churchill. You would just get more Gianfranco. And sorry for that, guys. Then the last question. Why, particularly in Europe, we believe that collaborative models such as the ones you find in data spaces are the solution to procure all the data we need for AI and other advanced applications. Over the last 2 years or so, AI has returned to the stage thanks to the incredible success of specific flavors of AI, like generative AI, and consumer applications that use it, such as the ones found in OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot. This Saturday is actually 2 years exactly since ChatGPT was open to the public. Doesn't it feel like it was a different world then? More than ever, the generative kind of AI is hungry for data. The richest Gen AI engines we use today were fed with all the data you can buy and all the data you can scrape from the public internet. And hopefully you've done that legally. But what happens after you purchased all of it? Well, fear not, because there will still be a lot of data out there that perhaps money can buy. It's data that does not have a price, data that individuals or organizations will feel comfortable to share only under, let's say, 3 conditions, if you ask me. The first one, you can give me sufficient guarantees that you will respect my rights over the data and the consent I've given you to reuse it. For example, the spectrum of purposes I would feel comfortable with. We call this sovereignty over the data. It's part of the broader spectrum of digital sovereignty that the new commissioner, Helen Filkunen, has in their job title. By the way, congratulations on starting the new job next weekend. Second condition, I can trust you, and I can believe you are who you say you are, and that you will do what you say you'll do. We may call this simply trust. And third condition, you will give me something I want in exchange. And as we said, that may not be money. If I am a small business, for example, like so many in Europe are, I want to collaborate with others effectively, perhaps to create a generative AI I need. I don't want to sell you my data, perhaps I want to be part of whatever great things you build with that. For example, an entire sector could come together in what we call an AI factory, contribute their data and benefit back from the generative AI model that could be produced with it. So guess what? That is what data spaces enable. Why data spaces are so urgent then? According to Research Institute Epoch, traditional ways to procure data will run out of sources by next year. Even worse, as a reaction to these data grabbing activities, other researchers at the Data Provenance Initiative have observed how sources of data that were traditionally kept open were closed over the last year as a reaction. So if we are reaching the limit of what the old practices can achieve, we have one more compelling driver to deliver data spaces now and unleash the remaining part of that universe of data in a way that is fair, committing to data sovereignty, to trust, and to business models that go beyond the mere exchange of cash. So how do we do that? That's why we organized the webinar today. In today's Insight series, DSSC's colleagues, Anna Garcia-Robles, Savas Rogotis of BDVA, and Tobias Guggenberger of Fraunhofer will tell us about a white paper DSSC wrote with our forum of stakeholders. This is available for you to download, to learn, and to enjoy. So I believe we will have the time at the end to take your questions, so stick around until the end. And now please join me in welcoming Anna Garcia to start talking about this beautiful white paper. See you in a while. Anna, please.
Thank you very much, Gianfranco, and also thank you for all participants. But Gianfranco, actually, you have provided very good appetizers that already builds important outcomes of the paper. So I hope that keeps people well connected with the topic. So yes, I'm Ana Garcia. I'm Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association, where we are one of the partners of the Data Spaces Support Center. And I have to say, this topic of generative AI and data spaces touches us, our association and community at the core. So we are very glad to be here sharing the learnings with you. So within the Data Spaces Support Center, just to tell you a bit more about my role, together with my colleague Savas, we are in charge of the large network of stakeholders that the Data Spaces Support Center is developing, and that includes the community of practice, the Strategic Stakeholder Forum that we will look at in a moment, but also very large ecosystem of collaborations and liaisons, including collaboration with the European Data Innovation Board, several, also the public sector, all kinds of initiatives on data, cloud, AI, computing, innovation hub, standardization bodies, and far beyond. And this is the context where this paper was born, and more will come in a moment. So also, maybe we go to the next slide, linking directly with the input from Gianfranco, and highlighting again that we are experiencing this rise of generative AI that is underpinned by the new foundation models. And we know there are numerous opportunities, many opportunities for businesses, public sector, and society. We are seeing this every day, even in our already private life. But now we believe, and I mean, more than a belief, that's what the paper tackles as a premise, that really the synergy between generative AI and data spaces, so we bring data spaces to collaborate with generative AI, with really can have significant transformative potential, this collaborative effort of bringing data spaces and generative AI together. And why? Because we think this is one of the keys to unlock the value of industrial, commercial, and personal data for Europe, but also we think this is something to extend worldwide. We actually think that this synergies created, all this value that data spaces will bring, can enable the use, as Gianfranco was saying, of data in more unethical, trustworthy, and regulatory compliant manner. We believe also on this data and AI value chains, in particular data and Gen AI value chain. So data spaces can help to be a bit more fair, to look on fairness on how we distribute value in the data and AI value chain. And also we see the point of new business opportunities and real incentives for data sharing. And this has been our motivation. And then we can see in our next slide, what is when I mean we build the rationale for this white paper. We thought, okay, yeah, but what is the purpose? We write a paper, and what do we want to achieve with this paper? Well, the most important and initial part, we want to inform about these opportunities that data spaces bring to accelerate the growth of very important, trustworthy generative AI, not any kind of generative AI. But also second objective that I think we already achieved during the production of this paper was actually to foster this common understanding. There are many different initiatives, people with different backgrounds, with different expertise, and the topic of data spaces is not always well understood, well grasped, and we really wanted to bring this common understanding from different stakeholders. Let's go directly to the next slide, because I explained in my introduction that we build this in quite a large network of stakeholders, but very central. Gianfranco and Anna Bustraghi were mentioning this. This has been a core exercise done with one of the stakeholder groups of the Data Spaces Support Center. That is what we call the Strategic Stakeholder Forum. And what is this? Because I think the context of this paper is different. So this is a multi-stakeholder group of key organizations that are very active and know they have expertise on data spaces and the data space landscape, and they work sometimes more in sectorial, cross-sectorial. They play an advisory and strategic role for the Data Spaces Support Center. And for the time being, and you can see the logos here, there are 32 organizations covering 12 member states in Europe, but many of them, they actually have coverage that is European and even international. I have to say this is not a closed group. is open. We have a process to accept new stakeholders. We are really very keen in having a very good geographical balance, and also make sure that there is good representation from the different type of users that we are addressing from the Data Spaces Support Center, and also different levels of knowledge and sectors. And you can see already in front of you that we are working already with policymakers both from member states, from different areas of the European Commission, a lot of research organizations, a lot of national initiatives, industry associations, also companies with different roles, and associations of their different level. So this is to understand the context. Now at the page of the gratitude, who concretely has been working on this paper. If we go to the next slide, and here is also, if some of you are already in the call, to give my big thanks from my part and my colleagues here in the call, because this has been a real collective effort with a lot of workshops and activities where we had a strong contribution from DSSC partners, a strong contribution from the partners that you saw in the picture before, from the Strategic Stakeholder Forum. And as you see them on the slide, I'm not going to mention them all. Also, some of the data spaces initiatives that they are building, the common European data spaces, in particular in media, language, and Green Deal. And then other stakeholders, mainly more on the AI infrastructure, like some AI projects like OpenGPT-X, but also major initiatives like Deploy AI on Demand platform, and some of the AI testing and experimentation facilities. With this, you can see that the group of participants, organizations, and also initiatives with different levels of expertise is quite large. And the value is not only in the content that we will explain or unveil in a moment, but it's also in the co-learning of the process. And very important, this paper is not the endpoint. There is so much to learn and to evolve. I would say that it's almost a starting point. We're already receiving comments. We're already receiving interest for further contributions. And as we go more into the content, actually the area of learning from real pilots and real activities happening is what we are really looking for the most. Now let's go a bit into the scope and content. So we've been talking, and also Gianfranco introduced very nicely these synergies between data and AI in general. Now we focus data spaces, generative AI, and we know this is a bi-directional kind of synergy. So we know data spaces can offer value to generative AI. And by the way, this is a known picture that has been already presented in different events, and is produced by a group of contributors led by Professor Ed Curry, also a core part of the Data Spaces Support Center. And here you can see the double dimension, how data spaces again contribute to generative AI, with aspects that Gianfranco has already highlighted, with this high quality data, with also these collaborative models and access to a community, and data governance and compliance aspects. But also the other part, the other direction is very, very important. And we know generative AI is actually helping data spaces and data in general, is helping to extract value out of data, is helping to accelerate innovation cycles, and also the topic of synthetic data, which is quite a very hot topic. However, if we go one step further, in this paper, we focus in one side of in one direction. Is simply to concentrate the efforts. That doesn't mean that it's more important, but be aware that we cover data space for generative AI. Although we have some of our stakeholders already saying, okay, now that we close this paper, let's start the other one. Okay, but it's very important that you know the scope. Then what is the target audience? So I see a lot of people in the audience. I would love that you post yourselves in the different areas in this picture. I mean, these collaborative papers we build mainly to give feedback to the data spaces initiatives themselves, and to improve from the Data Spaces Support Center in providing the assets that can really help to accelerate the value. So that's the core. But this is actually, this paper has quite a multi-stakeholder perspective, so has many target audiences, and it's a very interesting paper for policymakers, for businesses, for industrial ecosystems in general, and also AI initiatives and generative AI providers in the different dimensions. And now, if we continue, just before I give the floor to my colleagues, Savas and Tobias, that will guide you actually into the context, I want to explain how we construct this document, so we understand the storyline, and then we will pass immediately into the content. So the document is structured in 3 major parts. One that is the core of the document, that's what the part that it will be explained today. There is a second part that is not covered today, except that I will show the content. I mean, what are the stories? That is about the learnings from already some initiatives. And again, that's the part that we expect to keep growing and learning from in the future. And then we have annexes for those ones that, for instance, want to know about data spaces and want to know more about the initiatives, or want to know about the policy framework and also policy and regulatory framework that is in the context, or even want to know more about the technological and industrial trends in generative AI. Now, if I focus myself in the core, so in the core, we start actually presenting what are the challenges for the success of generative AI in Europe. And we give this a multi-dimensional perspective. Savas will explain this. Why? Why don't we focus on data for generative AI? Because we believe data spaces actually give answers to challenges beyond data. Savas will go more into details. Then we cover, okay, with all these challenges, data spaces can actually offer, and again, Gianfranco already gave a bit of a very good introduction, bring solutions here for this trustworthy generative AI. So those will be actually unveiled by Tobias, and is the core of the document of this white paper. But we also know that for this, let's say, great potential of data spaces with generative AI to be a reality, still we need to address, we need to keep working. So there is work to do, right? So we also highlight what are the points that we need to accelerate this value. And that's also Tobias will tell us. And finally, from that, we go to recommendations. That is also a very nice outcome of this document, where Savas will give us more information. If we go to the next slide, then I just want to tell you what initiatives actually provided some examples. Some are more theoretical, some are more practical, but they are all very useful and help a lot actually in the construction of the paper. So we received input, and you can find them in the paper, from 3 of the several common initiatives that are deploying the common European data spaces, the one in language, media, and Green Deal. Also for some generative AI, so to speak, initiatives, in particular Open GPTX, but also from the TED Tenders Electronic Daily initiative. And then we received, and you can find in the document, input from activities in research projects in the domains of healthcare, cybersecurity, and also agri-food, and you can see a bit the logos there. And then before I give the floor to my colleague, you might see also in the paper that there is a particular chapter covering the aspect of the AI factories. I suppose that at this stage, the majority of you know about the AI factories. If not, I already put there the link from the European Commission, where you can find much more information. But we have used this as an illustrative scenario, but also as a very real scenario that is going to go into implementation right away, and where we really is going to accelerate a lot all the aspects described in this document. And it's very cross-cutting to the data computing generative AI topic, so definitely fits very well across the whole document. I left here with you just the definition of AI factories that appears in the European Commission website, and as a very dynamic ecosystem to foster this innovation, collaboration, and developing in the field of AI. And as I said before, bringing these necessary ingredients, power, data, talent, and this to create this cutting-edge, computing power, data, and talent to create these generative AI models. And however, our white paper doesn't go in depth into the topic, just gives quite high-level aspects of it. And there are other separate documents where many of probably you, but many stakeholders are contributing separately. And for instance, under the PDBA scope, we have a discussion paper very active on this, going more directly into the stages and the more practical aspects of the integration. And for that, I stop here. I would like to give the floor to my colleague Savas, that will continue addressing the white paper, as we said, starting with the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So, from my side, when we started working on this paper, actually we have started on trying to identify the problem. So for us, the starting point would be the problem statement, and we really wanted to identify what are the distinct challenges, the needs that typically are in front of any project coping with Gen AI. What are the barriers for Gen AI being flourished in the next period? And with this, of course, someone would argue, and I think that Anna mentioned that before, that in a paper that is on data spaces and Gen AI, someone could say that data needs are the most important ones, are the ones that need to be highlighted, regardless of other needs faced by Gen AI projects. But from our perspective, we identified, also discussing with the broader community, that the list of issues and of course data spaces could play a very important role in overcoming many other needs and challenges. So in order to go much deeper into this, we started also exploring the different stages in a difficult Gen AI project lifecycle. And we acknowledge that there might be many life cycles depending on the case, on the project. So, for example, it's a different life cycle when a Gen AI project evolves from scratch and a new model is being created, and there might be a different life cycle when an existing model is being used. But in any case, in order to keep the discussion evolving, we have drafted a set of steps that typically we encounter in many of these cases. So Gen AI typically involves scoping and ideation, model creation or selection or creation, adaptation, evaluation, deployment with iterative loops, usage monitoring, and involvement. So together with the community, interesting thing is that when we started discussing also about these stages, we identified that these needs that we have identified, and I mentioned them previously, and go beyond data needs, apply horizontally in many of the stages and in different ways. And this is something quite interesting. So in the scope of this white paper, we started exploring these distinct needs. So we identified data needs, computing needs, skills needs, legal requirements, business and financial sustainability aspects, other challenges that are also linked to AI on the design aspects, ethical issues, mode collapse, something very important, content pollution and quality that is emerging, transparency and interpretability of the results, assessment and feedback, cybersecurity and environmental aspects. So we identified, as I mentioned before, these needs. We identified that these apply horizontally to many of the different stages that are typically found in a Gen AI project life cycle, and as I mentioned, in very much different ways. So we went through in each of these needs very specifically to identify how these evolve, how these are differing based on its distinct states. And this is actually the multidimensionality that I mentioned here. But at the end of the day, what I wanted to say is that data spaces, of course, are very important in identifying and supporting in the data needs of a Gen AI project, but of course the pillars could provide the means in order to overcome other needs and challenges. And I think that this is quite important to mention. And with this, it's a nice pass also to my colleague Tobias that will go through more in depth on the specific benefits that data spaces can offer before going then to challenges under the current setup. And Tobias, I would like now to give you the floor to you.
Oh, thank you, Savas. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and very welcome also from me, Tobias Guggenberger from the Fraunhofer Institute for Software and System Engineering in Dortmund. and it's a great honor for me to be here today and to present you our results of the white paper that some of you also contributed to, because it's one of the hottest topic, as my colleagues already introduced, how the transformative synergies between data spaces and Gen AI look like, what data spaces offer to Gen AI, and how to overcome some challenges that I will discuss in the second part. After I will show you the 4 biggest topics that data spaces offer for Gen AI. Starting with the first one. So as my colleagues already said, so one of the hardest issues is currently how to get especially high qualitative data into the Gen AI training of the models. And data space in that regard provide a very good infrastructure for that. So a secure, interoperable framework to enable the trusted sharing of data. And in that regard, also what we always talk about, the data sovereignty, especially in the context of what today, I think it was today, a German newspaper stated, one of the greatest thefts in human and mankind. So what basically happened in the past could be overcome with data spaces in the context of Gen AI. If we have sovereign sharing of data, especially organizations can rely on the data space trustworthiness when training Gen AI models. So the second part is that data spaces offer the possibility to foster collaboration by building communities of stakeholders, both on the technical side, but also and foremost on the business side. So these ecosystems create like a distributed value chain that is open for monetizing opportunities for all the participants of a data space. And they're not just about sharing the data, but also and especially about generating new business models and making money out of the data. So the third part is that data spaces have been created to some extent, especially for coping with European legislation. So in Europe, we have a long tradition of very important, from my perspective, legislation in form of acts like the AI Act, the GDPR, which is critical for Gen AI models also to consider, of course, and to comply with. And using data spaces simplifies the compliance by embedding the transparency, traceability, and also IP protection technology into the frameworks of the Gen AI development. And data spaces can also address cybersecurity and privacy, which is, of course, vital for trust in sectors like healthcare and finance, which are very crucial when developing and applying Gen AI models. And and that the fourth part I want to highlight here, we wanted to highlight also with the white paper, is the European Union investments and also the success stories. As you all might know, that the EU has invested heavily in data spaces, and so did also the member states to lead this transformation. And we have a lot of great success stories already. Just to name maybe 2 is the language data space, but also the Green Deal data space. I could continue with many more, but I don't want to use the time too heavily here. And other projects like the AI factories integrate further cutting-edge resources for startups, SMEs, and also researchers. In summary, I think data spaces are the connective tissue between data, technology, and the business, making them indispensable for Gen AI in the future. So coming to the second part of my part of the presentation today of the Insight series, as the challenges that needs to be overcome to unlock the full potential of data spaces for Gen AI. And we identified 6 of them. So the first is that there is a maturity versus growing demand at the moment. So Gen AI data needs a vast, of course. You need a lot of data, but many data spaces are not mature enough now or yet to meet these demands. So while Gen AI is growing, and so does the demand for them, for the data, we need to become much more faster in developing the data spaces, and so applying, enabling them to deliver also or supply the Gen AI models with the data they need. The second is that we need, there is a need for a holistic framework. So at the moment, we lack of an integrated digital infrastructure to address the diverse Gen AI challenges, like real-time data or synthetic data generation that they need and for some operations. And this is something that we are currently not too much taking into consideration in some of the data spaces. And so it is the second challenge that we need to overcome. So then interoperability and simplicity. We have technical barriers, of course, and complexity issues that hinders smaller players, SMEs, for example, from integrating with data spaces. And so does their data not become usable currently in the data spaces. So we need to overcome this by standardizing and make the frameworks more interoperable to enable solutions that directly can be used by smaller players to not have all the overload of technical complexity when implementing data space connections. So the fourth challenge is the data quality and also the representation. So just sharing data in data spaces does not directly mean that we can get high quality data in the spaces. So this is something that on the one hand, the data spaces need to somehow take into consideration as a prerequisite for becoming a player in the data spaces. So just easily said that when your data is not 80% good, you cannot share it, for example, to prevent a bias or inaccurate AI models. So this is something that we definitely need to consider in the future more heavily, and also enable organizations to become better in managing their data in a qualitative manner. So I've said 5 minutes ago that, of course, we had a lot of success stories, but currently we have also not too much success stories that go into the direction of how industrial data has been shared directly with the Gen AI and data spaces. And this is also because we at the moment have no success story of incentivizing industrial data for those. But we believe that there are some ideas at the moment and some initiatives that go into that direction. And we are very happy in the hopefully next year to talk about incentivation systems for those use cases. Last but not least is adapting to new data trends like real-time data streams and synthetic data, as I said before. And to cope with that, we need to constantly innovate within data spaces, like with our connector technology, for example. So a lot of potential, but also some technical and non-technical challenges that we need to overcome. But as you are all here and everyone is working very hard on overcoming those challenges. I think we're in a good way currently, and the policy is also on our side. Industry is realizing the potentials. So final word is let's come together in 1 year maybe and see what we achieved in that 12 months. And saying that, Savas, I think you are the next too.
I'm the next one. And thanks, Tobias, for your presentation. And actually, I wanted to say that we started this presentation with presenting the challenges, the problem statement. What are the needs from a Gen AI perspective? Then we went through the benefits of data spaces, how benefits can support Gen AI developments. And then Tobias, you presented to us the challenge under the current setup of data spaces that we might need to acknowledge. And now I'm passing to another important activity within this white paper that are the recommendations. So out of the collaboration with this group that Anna presented to you before, we came up with a concrete set of recommendations that is targeting different target audiences with the aim to prioritize areas of common work so that synergies could be fostered, we could involve the communities there, and then could influence developments and foster growth in this interplay. As I mentioned, these recommendations are targeting different target audiences. So we will start with a list of recommendations that are more for data space initiatives and the DSSC. And here you might find these 4 that I would like to present to you. First, to define and deploy means of simplified, harmonized access to cross-sectoral and federated data spaces, serving data accessibility for generative AI needs. This is a recommendation that, of course, applies to data spaces because there might be stakeholders interested of data that can be found maybe in multiple data spaces, in several data spaces, and data spaces or initiatives should reflect on this issue and try to find a way that stakeholders with simple mechanisms could have access to this data. Second recommendation is about fostering innovation in data ecosystem with Gen AI. And here relevant is the provision of Gen AI sandboxes or experimentation environments potentially within European data spaces so stakeholders could experiment and unlock the full potential in Gen AI value chain. And this is, for example, for establishing innovative projects that could support in providing feedback, in providing new recommendations, or identifying big missing pieces in this interplay. So this could be an important recommendation that should be prioritized. Another thing is, and I think Tobias, you mentioned about this, is the identification of use cases and the creation of catalog of learnings from Gen AI applications built on top of data spaces and data spaces. This is only natural because data spaces are becoming more and more mature. And in this context, there might be more and more Gen AI applications and systems that are leveraging on data spaces and benefit from them. So creating a catalog would be very beneficial, not only for identifying, for having insights on their experiences, on having this catalog of insights, but also that because it will help in providing as an instrument for providing incentives to newcomers and other organizations that are very much interested in investing in this interplay. And the fourth recommendation is the advancements in integrating Gen AI requirements in data spaces assets, frameworks, technologies, and participants. We discussed about Gen AI requirements. Although data spaces offer a means of providing concrete benefits, several of these requirements might need to be better reflected in the work of Data Space Support Center and in the different data space initiatives. So these concrete requirements it might be better to be reflected more in the next period. Then we have listed a concrete set of recommendations that is somehow more transversal in nature, in the sense that are applying for a multiple set of stakeholders. So going beyond data space initiatives in the DSSC, these are also relevant for policymakers, businesses, AI initiatives, and Gen AI providers, or existing industrial ecosystems. First recommendation in this context is to coordinate efforts for creating domain-specific generative AI models across industrial sectors by building on common European data spaces. And this is quite important from a sectorial perspective, that there might to have coordinated efforts for building these domain-specific Gen AI models, fostering growth in the sector. Second recommendation, to continue balanced and coordinated efforts in data spaces, Gen AI and computing infrastructure in multiple fronts altogether. And very linked to that is the next one as well, that is to shape an integrated and comprehensive framework to address the diverse needs of Gen AI in a holistic and timely manner. So we identified key areas for that, like regulatory compliance or the addressing Gen AI needs related to data, computing, infrastructure, business model, skills, but rather not in isolation, going from once only in isolation in different fronts, but all of them in a rather combined way. And the fourth recommendation is to accelerate training and upskilling of the workforce. We discussed about skill needs in Gen AI perspective for the interplay with data spaces, but also with computing ecosystems. These needs are also reflected. New skills and competences are needed to deal with these evolving requirements in different fronts, in data spaces, computing, and Gen AI, and their intersections. And this will also foster growth. It will be important in order to exploit any opportunities that emerge in this interplay. So these 8 requirements are listed in the white paper, and for us it's important to keep them in mind in order, as I said, to influence new development and also to foster growth and synergies among the different ecosystems. And with this, we go to the conclusions of the paper. So what we have identified with this group of people that contributed to this work and all this time that we have been working on the paper is that the momentum is very promising, surrounding the interplay between the different stakeholders in Gen AI and the data spaces. We really need to have sustained coordinated efforts from a cross-sectoral point of view, but also with the whole community, to follow through the recommendations that have been elicited, and this is to realize the full transformative potential of the symbiotic relationship. And finally, I think Anna also mentioned that this is a very much evolving in this discussion. It's not the ending point. It's actually might be only the starting point. We need to continue bridging knowledge gaps to address evolving needs. So if you also need ways to contribute, please reach out, because this is only the starting point for us. And with this, I would like to close my presentation. The white paper is available in DSSC.eu. There is also a relevant blog post about it. You could also download it through scanning this QR code so that you can have access to it and read it more carefully. And with this, I would like now to thank you and give back the floor to Anna Vustraki, because our presentation has finished.
Thank you, Savas. Thank you, Anna and Tobias, Gianfranco, for the introduction. So I see there is a lot of activity in the chat. So I will relay the question. I also see that there is a couple of people who raised their hands during the presentation. Feel free to write the question in the chat. If not, I will try to give you to fix the setup to make you speak, but I cannot promise anything because we always have the written Q&A. So let's start with the first question, which is from Judita, I think. And it says, hi, could you elaborate a bit more on the relevance of cross-data space interoperability to support generative AI? I think the topic came up during the presentation, but if any of you three would like to comment on the topic, I think Tobias is unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a very easy access point to the required data if we have interoperable data spaces. Otherwise, the connection to the data users, so the LLM training software, for example, needs to be part of many data spaces. So if we can achieve that only one access point is used, then it would be a great success, I would say, to have a more diverse data set and also from cross industry projects or use cases, for example.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tobias, for the reply. I hope Judita found the reply satisfying. Now we move to the next question, very interesting question from Mark, which goes, when referring to generative AI, whose generative AI are you referring to exactly? How do you prevent big players like Microsoft and OpenAI from simply exploiting and benefiting from data spaces and creating power asymmetries in the market? There seemed to be an assumption that the benefits of building the synergy of generative AI and data spaces will distribute benefits for organization and society, but there is a lot of risk there. So the question again is, what kind of generative AI are we talking about here exactly?
Maybe
Anna?
I can
Yes.
reply, but I think probably other colleagues want to reply. First, thank you. It's a fantastic question, and I agree that the risk exists. Okay. So when we talk who's generative AI, maybe for us it's not so important who's, but actually what type of generative AI we want to build, right? Under, let's say, the legal and ethical considerations that are being developed under the European context, but the risk is real. So, but I think actually data spaces mitigate that risk. How? Through the governance frameworks and also with the control that the different players have on that data. So the risk exists with and without data spaces. It's true with the data spaces, you mobilize more the communities to start sharing that data, but eventually that data is going to be sharing one way or the other. If someone wants the data, with the data spaces, at least you can define these governance structures that can prevent this unfair distribution with different rule books or different ways of really educating people on how to do it. But the risk definitely is there, and that's something that we do need to mitigate indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you again for the great questions. So please keep them coming, because this is what we want to use to foster the debate. So moving on to the next question, we have which initiatives go into incentivization of industrial data to be offered, and what kind of incentivization is there? It's does anyone want to take the question, or I can read the question a bit?
Yeah, I don't have a complete overview, but I think Anna wanted also to say something.
No,
but,
it's just
okay.
I don't understand well the context, but go
Okay.
Tobias.
Yeah.
I think you have to.
So basically, I think this is a relevant question and also considered in most of the data spaces covering or dealing with industrial data. But I think this question is most often under the surface answered or covered. So for example, if you are part of, for example, digital product passport use case in the Catena X network, for example, then you are, of course, having an incentivization of sharing your data to optimize, for example, the callback actions and not to be sued because your parts were broken when delivering cars. So then you have a direct incentive or indirect incentive because you get the revenue from the use case. So it's indirectly, but directly, I think it's maybe Anna, you have a better overview currently, but I think it's in many cases not directly tackled because it's also a hard question, how to monetize your data, for example, when it's not connected to real life and for foremost well-known supply chain use cases, for example.
Okay, thank you, Tobias. So I see that this question has already been partially addressed in the chat. But so this question from Haluk, that I repeat again, but I'm doing it because I think it's very relevant for the whole audience, which is there a call for building generative AI solutions on top of data spaces in the Digital Europe program or the Horizon Europe program? Some links I see already in the chat already been shared, but I'm wondering if Sebastian or Tobias, do you have any resources to share with the audience?
Well, what I can say, although I think this is more an answer for the colleague from the European Commission, besides what Gianfranco has shared in relation to AI factories, that this is maybe a bit specific for type of stakeholders. I think some of the deployment projects that will start soon will work with some pilots. So some of the use cases of the upcoming deployment actions that are already funded and will start soon will have to deal with some use cases. In relation to future programs, I cannot speak, as that's the mandate of the European Commission, not ours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Now moving on to the next question from Jan. This is another very interesting question, which is, are there any guidelines for data space developers to help promote data sovereignty for data subject? In other words, how can I, as a data space developer, help EU citizens to better decide what happens with data about them? This is a very important question. And who would you like to take?
I can take it quickly if you like. It's actually the easiest question in a way. This is why I'm taking it. That is, if you think about the whole work Data Space Support Center has been doing for the last 2 years, that's exactly the response to what you're asking. We were asked by the Commission to specify the ideal functionality of data space that is suitable for the kind of values and legislation we have in Europe. And if you look at for our blueprint, that is indeed a functional description of the kind of functionality you would expect in a data space that complies with that kind of requirements. We don't get yet to the point where we can say yes or no, true or false, to a more direct question like, is this a compliant European common data space? That's not where we're going yet. But we know there is a lot of requests from our community and in general to have clarification on that, because of course, particularly looking at the Data Act coming next year, all of us wants to come together in group in a way on what answer those questions. So for the time being, I would suggest you explore the content that we developed over the last 2 years, and you keep an eye on us, because we will give more direct answers over time, getting closer and closer to what you need.
Thank you very much, Gianfranco. Now, I'm not sure if anybody has something else to add, or we can go directly to the next question from Mark. Another very interesting question from Mark, which says, as data spaces will consist of not only open data, how do you ensure that generative AI that will use trained data space data does not do so on copyright data? This is such a huge problem in generative AI now. So how can it be ensured in the context of data spaces?
Yeah, maybe I can't give it a try, and another colleague can complement. Actually, this is addressed in the paper with quite intensity, I think. And you are completely right, that is a key topic. And with data spaces, I mean, the whole topic of compliance and having tools for compliance is very important. The topic of provenance of the data. So it's actually in the nature of how data is shared, the metadata, how the information that comes with the metadata, what really can help a lot, and also how in the context of data space, tools either provided by service providers or implemented as a core service also eventually in the data space can really help a lot for those that actually are producing working with Gen AI to have access to data that is well, they can identify it in a better way or work with copyright topics. Of course, it's something that is on the making in some cases, but it's addressed. And we see that with data spaces, we can actually give a more consistent solution to the problem that we fully agree is a very, very serious problem indeed.
Thank you very much, Anna. Now, there is a question which just pop up, which is, okay, there's a lot of questions. Let me go through them. So are there, well, this is a easier one. So are there any news on the toolbox, the DSSC toolbox publication date? Well, this is, well, who wants to take it first? Gianfranco?
It's easy. Yeah, it's published. It's been out for a few weeks now. I will post the link in chat, but you will be able to find it easily by yourself. Let me just find this thing.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Anna, I think there is a question that you missed.
There is a couple of questions that I missed, I think, because
sorry.
they keep coming, so I try to go through. So there is one which was asked by Giorgio, I think, which was partially addressed, and it was addressed at Tobias, but it was partially answered during the webinar. So what is the relationship between data space and the development or European language model? Is there the defined workflow in participation of a guideline for contributing to this process? I see some answer we already mentioned about the language data space, but I would like to, as an expert, I would like to take the lead to reply to this, Savas.
Just give me a second because I just found the question.
Sorry. I thought we were talking about the same question. So I can read it again if you want.
Well, I think Anna, both Gianfranco and I provided a few questions while Savas reads it, as he's actually acting as relationship manager of the language data space. But yeah, there are actually, in the context of language, with the language data space, with the somehow follow-up EDIC on the topic, on this topic, that also wants to take the data space to help building this European models. But also there are certain research projects that are working on the same environment on developing these European models and somehow linked to data spaces. I don't know. I mean, the way to engage, I think, Savas, you can maybe mention with the user forum of language, and I guess with the EDIC that is coming up and is kickstarting, I think there will be also ways for different stakeholders to engage. But now that Savas, probably you have the question well identified. Back to you on the engagement ways.
Thanks. Well, there is in a language data space a user group that anyone could register, so that could be part of this broad network of stakeholders of the language data space and supporting their developments. And I know that from the language data space perspective, they have been looking, in rich data sets, industrial data sets, also in languages that are not so well covered, in building also LLMs. So the language data space is not going to build LLMs, but they really want to build the background in order that this will be developed in the next period. And the AltEDIC, as Anna mentioned, is a way forward. I know that the AltEDIC will also support the new developments. So all the work that is done now by the language data space, of course, will be continued in the AltEDIC. But yes, as I mentioned before, there is a user group that you could join and also be part of these discussions.
Thank you, both Savas and Anna, for this question. Now, there is one which is, I found it very interesting, from Josema, a question which is that it was mentioning that there is a section about learning on this topic that we just dedicated a webinar to, even if it's not the focus of the webinar. Can someone provide a pragmatic example of how generative AI and data spaces are working to address particular use cases if they already exist?
Yeah, I can maybe start with what exists in the document. And Josema, thank you for the question. And I agree, the document, even being very intense, and the conversation was very intense, stays still in the high level. As we said, stays more informative. And then there are child papers that start addressing, for instance, for AI factories, put more meat in the bone. But for your particular question, so it's true that the learnings that we have in the document provide tangible examples, but in some of those examples still move in concrete but theoretical ground, meaning still there are not many, or not even many, but not many sufficient cases where we can see that in particular industrial data is being shared for generative AI, okay? So the cases give examples in some pilots, give a clear perspectives on the value in more concrete terms. and land it into specific examples. But it's true that we need to evolve more, and that's the reason why I said that that's the part where we need to evolve this paper in specific use cases, learnings in specific use cases, and real examples that really validate some hypotheses that also we put in this document. I hope I provided some input. Maybe some of the colleagues can go more in depth on the answer or give additional perspective.
Just from my, if I can comment, is that I have been reading also the comment, but I was a little bit not sure if at the end I completely understood, because it says that a particular use case in data spaces. So we are pretty much working on the other way around. I mean, how data spaces could support GenAI. So the use case is more on building GenAI, on supporting GenAI developments through also the support of data spaces. Yeah, and as Anna mentioned, we had several stories, although not many of them are in the maturity level that we might want to have, but this was also a concrete recommendation that we had also in the paper. So we really need to build this catalog as soon as also data spaces mature and more use cases are now emerging.
Thank you both, Anna. Thank you, Savas. Now we are close to wrap up, but we have a space for a couple of questions. So first of all, I would like to give a try, as the first time ever, I think, in the DSSC Insight series stories, to have a live question from Veselin, but I'm not sure if the hand is still raised for a question. I will briefly allow you to talk, Veselin, and if you're not So, Veselin, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. If the hands was up by mistake, then we will move to the next question. I see no reply here, so then I will actually move to the question from Simon, which, if the purpose of a generative AI is not always known beforehand, how does this influence trust in data sharing? Who would like to take this question?
Well, I can. That's the key question. I mean, that's true. That's one of the main issues of certain parts of generative AI. Of course, not on the application side, but on certain in the creation of fine tune of some models. I think that's a problem that goes beyond data spaces. I think some of the code of practice that are being developed probably are addressing this issue. But again, while the problem exists, I think at least through the data spaces, those sharing the data might not, at least are informed, or they can decide on the purpose of their data, even if that purpose is not known. So you can say, okay, this can be used even if purpose is not known. And I think then it will be the regulation, the code of practices that are being defined for general purpose AI that will define a bit the rules of how this works, right? But while, again, acknowledging the problem, I think if a solution is to be found, it comes through a bit more control and knowledge for those that will have to share the data in that unknown context. That's what I can say for the timing.
Thank you, Anna. So now, before wrapping up, we have one last question, but we're gonna face, which is from Veronique. And Veronique is asking, is Simple working on generative AI requirements and tools for data spaces? And did the DSSC provide Simple with such requirements? I think Gianfranco wanted to start with the reply, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, they're super welcome. Yeah. Gianfranco?
Thanks, Anna. Yes, our friends at Simple, of course, are working on topics that are also relevant to this. If the question is if they're working on data spaces, of course they are. Simple Open specifically is going to be a soft distribution of middleware software for implementing data spaces. And the objective itself for us working together is to keep aligned the way the software implements the functionality described in the blueprint. So you will, unless you do something very, very wrong, you will find a nice correspondence between what we describe, in our assets and what Simple will offer you as a curated collection of software. About Gen AI, perhaps you have not connected that some of the first open projects that are aimed for deployment on Simple Live in particular are indeed Gen AI projects. So the language data space is aimed also at enabling large language models, and it's one of the earliest data spaces to be deployed on Simple in the pipeline, let's say. And I believe they just announced how a new round of EU-funded data spaces will be aimed at Simple, like the Green Deal one, and also non-necessarily strictly data space applications like Destination Earth. That is practically a big, amazing emulation of the planet that will, of course, also enable AI models to run on top of the data. So in the next few months, perhaps I'm a bit optimistic, let's say in the next year, we will see lots of early implementations of how Gen AI, or in general AI training, will be done sourced in data spaces that are also funded thanks to our taxpayers' money. We want to see it, we paid for it, and now we want to benefit from it. It's coming.
Thank you very, very much, Gianfranco. So I did promise to close, but one last question, a few question actually came in, but I will tackle the one from Haluk, which I think is interesting. I see also Anna replied here. But what is the position of the Data Act and AI Act for the users of generative AI in data spaces? It's a really interesting question, and I wonder
yeah. Well, I can say, I mean, I'm not the expert. I just say that the paper actually addresses the topic of these two acts and a few more in the context of generative AI and data spaces quite in depth. So actually, the answer to my question would be use the papers to learn more, because actually there were a few experts on these topics contributing to the paper. But I don't think those acts actually talk about confront exactly these two terms, right? But for instance, there are particular requirements in the AI Act for AI in general, and for generative AI in particular, where data spaces actually can really help for those requirements to be met. And I guess similar examples occur also in other acts. So my recommendation, again, because we don't have the experts here in the call on the legal aspects around Gen AI and data spaces, is really to go into the paper, because it's covering quite in depth, I think.
Thank you, Anna. So on this, I would like to put the final notes on this great webinar. So first of all, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Savas, Anna, Gianfranco, and Tobias. I want to finish with a few call to action. So you see in the screen the QR code. Do subscribe to our newsletter, because this is the only way you'll know all the deliverables that we put out there. You can get in touch with us. So it's the fastest way to know what we are doing on a daily basis. Then, following Anna's call to action, after the presentation of the paper, I am posting in the chat the link to the blog post again about the paper that we just promoted, so you can see, you can download it, and you can analyze what we just unveiled today, and also to give us feedback, as Anna just posted in the chat. Thank you to the audience. We thank you so much for connecting on this November late afternoon to talk about this interesting topic. We will be back for one next webinar before the Christmas break. Someone told me that I just posted the paper just to Gianfranco only, and I don't think that's the right target audience. So let me.
I read it already, of course, Anna.
Let me post it to everyone there. Okay, so everyone now should see the blog post so that you can download the paper about generative AI and data spaces. So thanks again to the audience. We have one last webinar before Christmas, so we hope to see you there. And then we will be back, of course, in a new year with the Data Space Symposium and all new things and new blueprints. So we will stay tuned and have a very good evening. And thanks again to everyone.